Great to see you on this Sunday as we are diving deeper once again into the headlines here on KOCO 5. I'm Evan Onstadt. A lot to get to today, and we start this week with our Sunday panel. And what a treat we have here, because we have two prominent advocacy groups represented here today. Cole Allen is a policy analyst for the Oklahoma Policy Institute. Thanks so much for being here, Cole.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Your first time here. Our second time with Dave Bond, back with us here, the Vice President of Advocacy at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. Good to see you.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks for being here, guys. We appreciate it. So I wanted to jump in right away by talking about SB 1027 in front of the state Supreme Court. This is a bill that limits the numbers of signatures a petition can take from a single county when you're trying to put a ballot initiative on the ballot that would go in front of voters statewide. It also ban out-of-state money for signature gathering campaigns. There's very strong opinions on both sides of this. Cole, you wrote an article on your website saying, quote, "The future of democracy rests in the Oklahoma Supreme Court." And people accuse me of being dramatic sometimes. Is that dramatic hyperbole, or do you think that really is what's on the table here?
I really do. So the Oklahoma Constitution calls the initiative petition the first right reserved to the people. This is a foundational First Amendment right for us in Oklahoma.
To sign an initiative?
To sign an initiative to get something on the ballot to vote on directly. Our framers understood that the legislature is not always the most responsive to the needs of its constituents. And so they added this additional tool for direct democracy so people can put issues on the ballot, vote on them directly that affect their lives. And so SB 1027 severely limits people's ability to get things on the ballot and vote for them. And the Supreme Court has the responsibility to weigh this lawsuit. Are we going to keep these county caps? Are we going to keep these other measures that limit people's right to participate in direct democracy? Or are we going to allow the legislature to continue chipping away at a fundamental right?
Before, when we'd see these petitions on some of these successful ones that happened, for example, medical marijuana, Medicaid expansion, of course, criminal justice reform, all of these went through this ballot petition, and the signature gathering process could park around the different metros, OKC and the Tulsa metros, and that's where they could get the majority of their signatures in order to get it on the ballot. And Dave, I know the OCPA has a very different opinion than your organization, Cole, because you guys have said that this new bill, this new law, not letting them just park in two metros, is a common sense reform. Why do you think that?
Well, we definitely do think the state Supreme Court should uphold the law. There's no reason why they shouldn't. The state constitution here in Oklahoma makes it very clear that not only can the legislature make the rules and occasionally adjust the rules on how the initiative petition process works, the state constitution actually directs the legislature to do so. So a lot of the arguments by the people who brought this lawsuit to try to get the law tossed is saying that the legislature does not have that right, which is just not in sync with what the Constitution says. And I think it's really important. I'm not saying this about Cole, but I am saying this about the people who brought the lawsuit. It's not that they're worried that they can only go to Harmon County and they're limited on the number of signatures they can get in Harmon County. What they don't like about this new law is that they might have to actually go to Harmon County to get some signatures. Because right now, to your point, let's take, for instance, this group out of New York City that's pushing State Question 836 to radically overhaul Oklahoma's election system and put it in the Constitution.
The open primaries.
The California jungle primary deal. Yes, it was introduced here by some folks from New York City because they know that in Oklahoma, all they have to do is come in and they can pay out-of-state signature gatherers to come in there and do exactly what you just said, park in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. They need 173,000 signatures to put that on the ballot. There are 450,000 registered voters in Oklahoma County alone. They could get all their signatures right there and there's no requirement to go to another county and get a single signature. If you want to change the U.S. Constitution, you have to go to 3/4 of the states and get approval. We have nothing like that in Oklahoma. All that this new law does is merely spread some of that out. The way the math works out, you got to go to about 20 counties to get signatures so that you have a wider cross-section of Oklahoma represented to put something on the ballot.
All right, Cole, let me bring you back on that then. What's your response to that? Is it wrong the way it was before?
I don't think so. So I would push back on the legislature's ability to introduce this new math. Our Constitution, Article 5, Section 2 here in Oklahoma, says that 8% of the voters have the right to put forth legislation. It doesn't say 8%, but only if some come from Tulsa County, some come from Harmon, some come from Guymon. It just says 8%. So if you get the 173,000, which that'd be 15% for a constitutional amendment out of Oklahoma County, under a constitution, that's fine. It is just to get it on the ballot. And then everyone in the state gets the opportunity to vote on it, and it has to pass a majority of the votes.
Yeah, it's interesting because, by the logic that you're saying, this is giving an outsized influence on the metros when it's doing this. Well, anything that goes in front of a state vote already would have an outsized influence from the metros, correct? Because that's where the majority of people live in Oklahoma. So why should there be a difference between the vote itself and the ballot petitioning process, the signature gathering?
I think because what you really have seen in Oklahoma over the last 10 years or so are groups from the East Coast, like this group out of New York City that's pushing State Question 836, and they're literally coming in here to see, it, in one of the nation's cheapest media markets, if they can pass something like a major California jungle primary initiative. Because if they can do it here in a cheap media market, then they can go do it in Tennessee or Arkansas or Missouri. So they use us as a testing ground. And what this new law, all it's trying to do is say, you know what, New York City people, that's really not what this is for. That's not why the Oklahoma Constitution allows things to be put on the ballot. If Oklahomans still want to do this, that's totally fine. You can still use Oklahoma money. You can spend as much Oklahoma money as you want. You can hire Oklahomans to do the signature gathering.
Since when are conservatives concerned about the source of money going into the election process, though? Because I remember seeing that argument. I was like, I thought that money can come from anywhere in this new American democracy, and that it's not a big deal. But here, you think that is a problem when it's outside.
When you look at the type of the stuff they're trying to do here, trying to make Oklahoma look more like other parts of the country instead of allowing Oklahoma to be Oklahoma, I do think it's a problem. They're coming in here and putting things on the ballot to give us the highest sales tax in the country like they tried to do a few years ago. That was East Coast money. They came in here 5 years ago and dramatically expanded taxpayer-funded health care to able-bodied working adults. That was East Coast money that came in to do that. Now it's New York City money coming in on State Question 836. I do think the legislature is trying to discourage that out-of-state influence from coming in. There's nothing in this new law that prevents actual Oklahomans from doing those things.
Right. It is obviously a lot harder right now, and the people that were trying to get the recreational marijuana ballot measure, they said that they were unable to do so in large part because of the new regulations that have been put in place. Cole, let me push back, though, against people who say that they want the old way of doing this, because isn't the old way of doing things, people did not want change, specifically people on the political left, because they knew that the ballot petitioning process is the only way for them to get some of these things that they really cared about, Medicaid expansion, perhaps some of these marijuana laws, through, because they knew that the state legislature in Oklahoma was not going to do it. So isn't that they just don't want it to change just because of that reason?
Not necessarily. I think part of it is that the Supreme Court here in Oklahoma has deemed this a fundamental right, and we don't like giving up our rights here in Oklahoma. I think that's evident by our history. But the issue at stake is not, is it a liberal versus conservative thing? Because we see these measures passed by the majority of Oklahomans. The majority of Oklahomans are not registered Democrats. And so when it comes down to things on the ballot themselves, that becomes nonpartisan. It becomes, what do people, not as Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians or Independents, what do people want? What do they need? And if the legislature is not providing that, our founders made sure that we have a way to get those on the ballot.
All right, let me switch. We have just a little bit over a minute, but I did want to touch on the race for governor because we had our first candidate forum. They're answering questions on topics. I care way more, and I know you gentlemen do too with where you work, not on the horse race at this moment in time, but in the issues. Dave, what do you think are the issues that are going to be driving, particularly the GOP primary vote for these gubernatorial candidates?
It's probably what it normally is in Oklahoma on these big statewide races, especially for governor. Economic issues, prices are still high from several years of pretty strong inflation. Oklahoma families are still dealing with that, including working Republican families. Also, education is always a big topic in any statewide race for governor, or a lot of other statewide offices too. And then I do think culture issues. I think there's a lot of Republican voters, conservative voters in Oklahoma who are worried about the culture in the country and some pretty radical things that they've observed over the past 5 years, and how are we dealing with that in our state?
Cole, what do you think voters should be looking at as they're judging their candidates for governor?
I agree with Dave. I think the economic affordability issues, what do parents talk about at the kitchen table with their kids? Can we afford an EpiPen for our child? Are our kids getting an affordable and quality education here in Oklahoma? And I think they may see tax cuts talked about, but we've been cutting taxes for 25 years here in Oklahoma. What do we have to show for it? It's overpromising and under-delivering, and I think lawmakers, especially going into this campaign season, have a chance to really deliver on actionable, real change for Oklahoma families that aren't going to benefit their wealthy donors.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to obviously continue to follow that race and many others as we move into election season. I want to thank you both for being here. Thanks so much. I enjoyed the conversation.